Good morning, everyone, and welcome to American Scouser's morning coffee or tea on this Wednesday morning. And yes, it's just us, Cersei, saying here, good morning. Robin and Nightwing taking over, and Batman is away. Perfect. It's funny because I'm wearing the Batman shirt, but then we're pretty much Robin and Nightwing at this point. So pretty good call, Cersei, and good morning as well. Of course, it's myself, John, 1/3 of the Wednesday crew. No Timucin, if you guys are aware. He's on vacation somewhere, I guess, leaving us here to do the dirty work. But yeah, I digress. With me, of course, is I guess the first choice best dad in the world now because
I don't
Tim's
know. He's on vacation though.
he's on
so
vacation, but
that
then
makes you number one dad when you're on
right
vacation.
then, but then he's been missing quite a bit frequently, right, Gordon? So
Yeah,
at some point, this availability issue's gotta be addressed, someone's gotta take over.
it's I hesitate to compare Timucin to Trent Alexander-Arnold because we know what that does to him. But I feel like the Bradley right now.
Right. Well, I made a reference a few shows ago as to him being Allison, but then we know like Kelleher's good enough to deputize whenever, right? And it's kind of been like the case where is this Tim right here? Hey boys, leaving right now, but figured out hop on to say hi. Well, hi Tim.
We're just make sure we didn't do anything right away to slander his name.
Right. We didn't. We were just having some pretty excellent conversation here. So, yeah. Let's speak of the devil, right? And he appears. Hey, boys. Yeah. All right. So, not a lot to talk about in terms of Liverpool news, barring, of course, the win last weekend against Ipswich. And I was talking about it with you, Gordon, before the show started. We weren't around during post-match, so we didn't really get to give our impressions in terms of how the game went, who we liked, what we liked seeing, what we didn't like seeing. So let me actually bring that up here, some stats from the game. Obviously, as everyone, Tim saying, watching this early slander before leaving. Yes, glad that you tuned in. But yeah, in terms of the Ipswich game, Gordon, obviously poor first half, very substandard first half, but sort of it looked like a Jurgen Klopp team, right? Very early kickoff, very bad first half, but then somehow managed to get through it in the second half, although in rather convincing fashion, because Ipswich probably did not get a touch of the ball during that half. We practically dominated possession, got into our patterns and everything. So I guess let me start with the glass half full approach. What did you see from that game that you would say that you would take and go like, yeah, this is absolutely great?
Well, it's first game of the season, brand new manager. It's a brand new team too. So he doesn't really even have any, he's got no experience in the Premier League. He's also got no experience against this team, which, nobody in the league really has experience against this team except for the other two teams that were promoted with Ipswich. So, and it's away, and, this is the first time in 22 years this team has been back. So you knew that the atmosphere was going to be against Liverpool. And then also new system. A lot of the players had just come back 2 weeks ago. So familiarity. So I wasn't expecting them to light the world on fire in the first half, and they definitely didn't. But it was a little nerve-wracking because, like you said, this was very much a Jurgen performance from last season where Ipswich, if they were just a little bit of a better team, probably could and should have scored on us in the first. And how many times last year were we inside the first 15 minutes, we're already down 1-0, and then we're having to chase the game, which is possible because we kept putting in second half performances like we did against Ipswich last year. But it's not a comfortable place to be. So I think we were lucky for it to be 0-0 at halftime. And then something that Klopp wasn't always good at doing was totally switching the tactics right away. I think he was a very emotional coach in the sense of knowing what taking somebody off at halftime was going to do to their mental state. And Slot was like, screw it. You didn't win a single, what he said in the press conference. Now, I know that there's been some talk on Twitter about, I think he didn't lose every single battle, Kwanzaa.
Yeah.
But for him to come out in the media and just be like, that's why I did it. He didn't win a single battle. And then all of a sudden Kanade comes in, and it's just maybe you don't agree with it, but the results, you can't argue with that. And he only switched the one player right away, and the game just totally took on a different attitude.
It's pretty telling as well, the ruthlessness of of Slot, like in terms of trying to establish his name, his presence in the team early. Like there has been conversation as well. Like if we're going by how he approached this game in terms of players who aren't performing, no matter how much credit they have in the bank, if they're not performing for a good run of games, they're out. Simple as that. Which can be a good thing, which can be a bad thing. It depends on your perspective. But considering we've been with Klopp for longest time, we've only been like exposed to one particular point of view regarding that issue. So it's in terms of freshness, it's definitely eye-opening. And thankfully, right, it managed to lead to something great, which is us getting the 3 points. Serzi, how could you? But that is a good segue, though.
He was pretty. I mean, I think maybe it is just the double pivot. It looked like he was
right.
He's set for that role. It's going to be up to him now because we can see that he works in it. So now it's going to be whether or not he's got that mental fortitude to continue to put in a good run of form. Now, again, it's Ipswich, and we saw that they pressed so hard in the first, and I just kept saying, I was just watching my wife, and she doesn't care, but like I've got to talk to somebody. So I was like, I don't think that they're going to be able to keep this up for 90 minutes, and I think that also really helped the game was that the fact that they could not do that high press anymore. And as soon as they stopped doing the high press, we were able to knock the ball around, which is exactly what Slot wants to do. And we were able to find a lot of openings and score goals and totally dominate possession.
How good was Trent's pass to Salah, though? Like, he did not have to take that ball was weighted so well that Salah didn't even have to take a touch. The moment he got to the ball, he just moves it over to Jota, just smooth, and then Jota finishes, right? So that's just Slot ball in a nutshell, right?
Yeah. And I said it in the Discord chat. That's the one thing that I really dislike about football is the fact that we only count the assist to the pass. Whereas like in hockey, you get two people get the assist. It's the first and the second pass get an assist. And it's because, especially like in a game like hockey, it's very much like soccer in that it's fluid. And the movement from the transition from defense to offense is very fluid. It's not start, stop like football, like American football or baseball. It's, one to the other and bing, bang, boom, goal. And that Trent pass, the goal doesn't happen without that. And it was arguably the better pass. It was better than the goal, to be honest. And the fact that doesn't get rewarded in this sport, that always bothers me.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of emphasizes how there are some people, obviously if you scroll to the depths of social media, which is obviously not a healthy thing to do, who just easily just says, okay, we could sell Trent for 100 million. It's just, he's just so critical to the side, seeing how he can just dissect the defense with just one pass and everything is like in our favor. Ryan says here that I'm sold on Gravenberch. He is possibly the best player outside of Salah on the second half. While I might agree there, Ryan, I'll be the first to say that he also had a great start last year. Like, I don't know if you remember our early Europa League group stage run and his early Premier League appearances. He looked really good. And I'm the biggest Gravenberch fan out there, but let's see him try and do it at a more consistent level. Like, I'm expecting him to kind of ride the wave against Brentford. Like, that is non-negotiable. He can't do this against Ipswich and then just kind of be anonymous against Brentford at our home pitch. So, obviously, great start, but more of the same, please, right? So,
definitely.
Yeah. John Gordo could be a complete name. True. I agree. Ryan says hockey rules are better. Yeah, probably get some of those. The best parts, put it in footy. It wouldn't change the nature of the sport too much, wouldn't you say, Gordon? Like in terms of like the hockey assist and all that stuff. We have way too many stats present in footy. Yeah, I guess I did like the inclusion of XG though. Like a lot of old heads say that XG, SMXG, stuff like that. Like he didn't score, blah blah blah. I think it's a pretty good metric though, Serzi. It's all dependent on.
It's good for people like me who are trying to convince everyone else that Darwin Núñez is not the option, right?
Oh boy, let's not go there. Otherwise, this show is going to be 2 hours long. Gordon.
All right, so since I broke the ice on it, I think the first thing I thought of when I saw how rigid and how brutal Slot's tactics are, like how often would we say that with Darwin last year? It was like, what is Jurgen waiting for? Like why is he keep selecting Darwin? And I think that the ruthless we're all expecting. This is third year. of Nunes, and we're all saying if he doesn't perform, like, he should be sold. And a lot of people are on the fence about whether or not he should have been sold this summer.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, "Oh, new coach, give him a fair try. It's going to be a new system."
Yeah.
I think that if he does have that like wavering, we're not going to see Nunes, because it doesn't seem like Slot's going to be able to put up, or he doesn't put up with that kind of stuff. If like you don't have a good performance in the first half, I'm going to yank you. And so many of Darwin's performances last year, you could argue that like under Slot probably would not have seen 90 minutes like he did with Jurgen. So I'll be interested to see that.
Yeah, it depends. It probably depends on what Slot sees more on a player. Because, like, for example, if Darwin isn't necessarily performing, I think his energy kind of makes up for it. And we know Klopp is a big effort guy, right? So I don't know if Slot is like an effort guy. If he sees that you're giving the 1,000,000% effort, but then it's not just coming off, he might kind of hook you at the 60th, 65th. So it's definitely something to think about. But one thing I will say though is that chance that Jota had to make it 1-0. Darwin is hitting that straight at the keeper, like 100%.
With that perfect run.
Right.
The one that really bothered me was the Diaz one, where it was
for sure.
10 beautiful passes through the middle, ticky-tacky football all the way up to the front and like inside the 6-yard box. And he should have just passed it back over to Salah and decides to shoot it.
Matush says here, I think I disagree with the last statement, Gordo. Nunez often had good games, just didn't have the end product. And yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, right, it depends on what Arnie is looking for, right, on a player. Like, obviously, we're all mixed with Nunez, which is unfortunate, right? For a player who came in with that kind of a fee, we should all be like have a consensus opinion on whether he's good or bad. So it's just really polarizing. So it remains to be seen. Probably not fit enough, right, Gordon, to come on and play, because he didn't see a single minute, even though you'd expect him to come in at the end, especially since that Ipswich were chasing the game. Right.
I thought we'd see him. I thought it was like for sure kind of perfect opportunity for him to kind of cement his place, with Diaz, with his finishing wasn't great, which is what we saw last year. And, Diaz is much the same, played every minute of the international tournament. And so I wasn't expecting him to kind of be reborn, because he really didn't get a break. But I felt that, with Ipswich tiring, with how many chances we were getting, it was kind of an opportunity to bring a little bit of chaos in there and totally throw everything for a loop. But so I was surprised we didn't see him, to be honest.
It was almost a change that made too much sense that it didn't happen, right? So, I mean, obviously you'd put money on him to play against Brentford, whether in a starting capacity, which probably not, but then definitely off the bench, right? Like in terms of him coming back from the Copa America, kind of, pouring his heart out there. He's earned a little bit of rest, I mean, same with Gakpo, who I believe came in, right?
Yeah, he did.
Gakpo did for like around 15 minutes, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack from that game, including the thoughts on the Konate change against Ipswich, who should start against Brentford. I guess we could go there when at the end of the show when we kind of predict our lineups against Brentford. But in terms of Konate's cameo, Gordon, pretty much flawless, right? Won every duel. Vintage Konate just distributed the ball well. Nothing really too fancy, right? You would say?
Oh yeah, that's what we've been hoping to see. That's what we know that we bought, and that was what I think when we did buy him as the eventual replacement for Virgil, that's what we expected to get in and out. And when he was in the Winter World Cup, that was his performances for France. He's just a solid guy. I mean, used his body in every sense of the word. He was up in attack every once in a while. I mean, it was definitely a good performance. Now, was that because his mindset was a little bit different in the sense that he came off the bench instead of having to start that game? Right. Who knows? But that was, you can't argue with what we saw. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, it's not to dwell too much on the game. Obviously, we have quite a bit to talk about. But ending this conversation, did you see what is something that you saw that maybe you feel like wasn't as good? Like the glass half empty perspective, right? We started with the positives. Now let's end with the negatives. Who in particular, or what in particular, did you see that maybe was a cause of concern for you? Obviously, it's just one game, but then it's pretty much all we can go for right now. So
I hate to bring it back to transfers, but it's not going to be totally about transfers. It's just going to be looking at those players. We didn't bring anybody in, and with the little time that we have left, we're not going to bring in enough players, I believe. It's just too little time, too much to do. It's going to be a long season because a few players already looked exhausted. I mean, McAllister for one, and I know that he didn't get a whole lot of time to practice, and maybe that was it. It's just the rustiness of having those 2 weeks off for his vacation.
Right.
But yeah, there was just so much rustiness. The players were slow. I mean, even Gravenberch started the game poorly. I mean, they looked off the mark. I mean, both the middle just looked like we were getting overrun. And Diaz, again, it's just like does everything and then gets the goal, and he's so tired that he shoots it, and so unless we can find some breaks and rotate the team well, I think, we're probably looking at a rough winter where everyone just kind of hits that point where it's just too many games. Their legs are just shot. So it'll be interesting to see how we handle the second half of the season.
Pretty much emphatic agreement here with Ryan saying that left back is going to be a big problem for us. Cersei saying that Robertson is done. He does look pretty much finished physically, doesn't he, Gordo? It's the first game of the season. Granted, he just came back from injury, right? Giving him the benefit of the doubt, obviously all the years of service with us. But his style of play is something that's not necessarily sustainable at this point of his career without Tsimikas has been okay this preseason, right? And he kind of got a look in towards the end, but in terms of him being the future of the club at that position, that's not necessarily what you would peg him as. So it's probably one of the holes, as you mentioned. Like, we have 6 issue, center back issue, possibly left back issue, right? But obviously you mentioned limited time. So I guess from those positions, right, left back, center back, DM, if you're probably going to choose one to get a player instantly, let's say we're just going to get one player, right? Which position would you get him for?
That's a tough one because I think looking at the team in the second half, you could argue like they could probably get away with not having a 6 this year.
A true
because
6, right?
we can kind of paper it over with a Band-Aid like we did last year. The Robertson one troubles me because he just came out too midweek. I think it was maybe yesterday. There was an interview and he's like, I'm just starting to be pain-free for the last 5 months. So he's got whatever happened in that injury, he still has chronic pain. So while his body may be fully healed, he's still experiencing chronic pain, which is slowing him down. And I think you saw that a little bit. You also have to say he has the ability, if the pain has stopped, he has now the ability to push on and get fit again. And he may just not be fit because of the pain. I mean, it takes almost no time. I mean, it's with everything, but with this sport, especially because of the speed, you could train for 3 months and not be prepared. And it only takes about 1 week for you to get off the pace. And if he's been battling something that's been causing him pain for 5 months, he's well off the pace. And so there's a possibility that he could come good and really focus and train if he is totally pain-free now. But a left backs would be a good move. And because of Costas, you probably could get away with a younger talent, maybe somebody that we could potentially grow into that role because we do have the option. It's not a Robertson, but Costas
kind of like a Connor Bradley role, right?
Yeah.
On the other side. Yeah.
He can do the job. Yeah, he can come in and do the job and kind of fill in the gaps until we get whoever we buy up to speed. So it doesn't have to be like an extreme purchase of the next big name. It could just be like a younger kid that, shows the potential. So that would be, at this point, that's probably the biggest circle on my agenda.
Yeah, it makes sense as well, though. I agree with Timucin, what he said the previous show, where we're probably not looking for a traditional, defensively, anchor Fabinho type defensive midfielder. We probably want one who could progress the ball too. So that's definitely an issue, I think, where we can wait, if that makes sense, as loosely as the term wait can get you at this level, right? Ryan says if we lose Gomez, we are screwed at left back. True. Don't have an issue selling the academy players, though. Yes, that's pretty much telling, right? We're offloading a lot of guys, but we're not bringing in anyone, which is pretty much eye-opening. Connor Bradley and Trent will be our wingbacks by December. Half joking, half scared. Shitless. Yeah.
And with the academy players, too, it's not just academy players because we see those come and go all the time. These are guys that, last year we were like, hey, these guys might be coming through the ranks when everyone retires, and now it's like, Doak and everyone's, Bobby Clark, and so a lot of these guys that we've kind of circled to kind of make their entrances or at least be role players for us moving forward are all out. So it's not, it's like high profile youth.
The good thing is though, like if for example a guy is not like fancied by Arnie, he's just like, yeah, you can go. Like we've kept some guys here longer than we should have, if we're being real, under the Klopp era, Reece Williams, Nat Phillips, so on and so forth. Even Seth Vandenberg, right? Like he was really not going to come in, and we still kept him for some reason, and now he's probably going to be going. We're going to make a profit on him, so that's great, right? The only issue is we got to turn that profit into into a decent player, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting last 10 days of the transfer window, whether or not Liverpool is actually going to realize, like, hey, we have a pretty decent squad. Maybe we just need to take that next step, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I guess this is a good segue into transfer news because one of our players still does not have a contract extension. And this player, of course, is Big Verge, who was included in the PFA Team of the Year for last season. This is the list right here, Gordon, with Van Dijk being our only player on this list. Do you see a particular position there where you see one of our guys getting in, aside from Big Verge? Like that Walker position at right back, I feel like is a big question mark for me, considering how, despite the positional change, Trent still looked the real deal, although he did have an injury-prone season.
I think had he stayed healthy the whole season, we would see Trent there because Walker is like, that's all he had. We kind of saw it in all through the Euros. Is his speed is starting to falter and he has nothing else. I mean, he's not a terrible defender. Don't get me wrong. He is definitely top class, but he's not. Without his speed, there's a lot of vulnerabilities there.
Yeah.
And I think that Trent would have probably made that squad if he's healthy. In terms of our midfield, I think, I thought and I know that there's differing opinions on this, but I thought what McAllister did was monumental last year in the sense of you've got like a world-class player that has only ever played like an attacking-minded mid position, and we've kind of thrown him in the back and be like, yeah, you're kind of going to have to be a little more defensive and you're going to have to spread passes. And I think he did that expertly. So for effort, I would put him in there, but I don't think you can argue with those three in the middle for their contributions last year. And then at forwards, I mean, that was one of our biggest issues was like there was just a lot, solid. I always say like the amount of players in this league that would kill for a Salah off year, like where we go, like Salah's just not up to it. You know how many players would just fucking give their left nut to have a bad Mo Salah season? But in terms of like who you think he is, and especially when people are making these votes, sometimes they look at it, it's about form, which is sometimes hindering because you can have 15 goals in a season, but if you're Mo Salah, oh, that's a bad season, Mo.
Right.
And it's like, what? Like 15
PFA though, this is picked by the players, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
PFA team. Yeah.
So, but they're all influenced by their
true,
media and all that. So
if you're a player and you see your peer just score 15 goals after he scored like 30 last season, you'd probably go like, he's lost a step.
Yeah,
I agree.
Exactly.
I agree. But Big Virgin there, which is great in terms of us long term. So let me bring up this stat here. Virgil van Dijk now has 4 appearances for the PFA Player of the Year, Team of the Year rather, with Rio Ferdinand being the only center back in the Premier League history to have more. One of the best to ever do it. So I feel like the arguments, Gordon, for Van Dijk's legacy, not to sound like a freaking American sports personality, right? Talking about legacy and all that, but he is at that point of his career where we're kind of looking back and ranking him amongst the greats, right? The argument amongst Van Dijk was that he wasn't doing it long enough, but now being tied with one of the best, I would say probably the best Premier League center back of all time, Rio Ferdinand, right? In terms of Premier League PFA appearances, right? I mean, do you think that puts him above, or he's still in like that level below him? What do you say about this whole thing?
I would say it's always, unfortunately, because I'm not one of these like I'm American sports fans. I think that in terms of media and public opinion that are not Liverpool supporters, if you look at the amount of accolades and trophies that Rio Ferdinand won, Verge is at this point in his life is never going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be why he's always ranked below Rio.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's anything against Verge. I just think that's just the nature of this game. Is like you got to win things, and Rio Ferdinand won everything and more, and Verge, has won a lot, but he's never going to touch the amount of trophies that Rio Ferdinand has held. And it was just such a dominant era for Man United at that point. And I think, though, like one thing that surprised me with Verge is when he got that injury against Pickford, the knee injury. And I know I've said it on these Wednesday shows so many times. I know I've said it on the Drinking Inside the Box post 1,000 times, but people don't come back from an injury like that at the level that they were before the injury. It's not a career-ending injury, but it is a career-altering injury. And I think, like, we are looking at the greatest genes ever.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the greatest biology that has ever been put into a person is in Virgil van Dijk, because the fact that he has come back from such what would pretty much derail everyone else's career and come back just as good, and to make the team of the year, the PFA team of the year. I mean, I think that in itself speaks volumes of like how monumental this player is.
He's actually made it twice since the injury, right? Which is as much times as he made it before the injury, which is pretty much impressive. The only thing that was different in terms of individual accomplishments pre-injury was that he actually won the PFA Player of the Year outright on that 18-19 like legendary season, which is the one thing that I feel that Van Dijk enthusiasts can have, because you never see really, like in the modern era, right? Obviously you had like back then some absolutely world-class defenders, but to go toe-to-toe with two of the GOATs in terms of the Ballon d'Or placing Messi, Ronaldo, and you're just sitting next to them in the ceremony, right?
And they stand up to applaud you.
Right, exactly. Like
there's that famous image of him standing up and Messi and Ronaldo are like this. Like,
exactly. And
there was like people thought he was actually going to win it. Like I know we did too. Yeah, like it sounded as though like all the rumblings were like, yeah, it's gonna be him. Messi and Ronaldo are aging a little bit, and I mean, the only other person that's done that, in my opinion, is Steven Gerrard and Michael Owen. I mean, Michael Owen didn't have to come up with Messi, but like Steven Gerrard was on the stage after that 2005 Champions League. And Messi and Ronaldo were up there, and they were in their prime at that point too. So it's kind of it's unbelievable to see that stuff.
Yeah, it's great that despite losing that version of Van Dijk, we've gotten a pretty great like 90% version to kind of carry us here. Matu saying Rio didn't have 115 things against him. Yes, which is another thing I bring up. Going up against an absolute juggernaut that's banked by a nation state is pretty tough. It's pretty tough to win the amount of Premier League titles that Rio did, considering the opposition that you're going to be going against. And Nick says here that Van Dijk's legacy is just a little tiny lesser than Ferdinand's, which I agree. I agree with your point, Gordon, 100%. Like, as much as I just harped on him about like the appearances next to Messi and Ronaldo and the fact that he had to win against Manchester City, go against Manchester City, you still got to translate that to trophies, right? You still got to win more than one Premier League. You still got to win more than one Champions League, right? Like, unfortunately, history favors the people who win, right? So Rio's won more stuff. It is what it is. Maybe Verge can kind of win a few more things before he gets out of Liverpool to kind of sweeten that argument a little bit. But as of this point, well, I guess we'll take 90% of prime Verge, right?
Oh, yeah. I would.
Objectively, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead.
Matoush was saying here, objectively, it's absolutely absurd to talk about two players being top three in 2005.
Yeah, unbelievable to think about. They've been
at
the top of their game for so long. And I know I've said it on here before, and I know it's depressed Timucin, but this is who Liverpool have come up against over the last 10 years and what they've done, they've cheated. Okay,
Right.
it may not be like official yet, but like they've bent the rules. And they also, they won a Champions League. They won their only Champions League in a time when they were supposed to be banned from UEFA for the same instances. But if you look at what Jurgen Klopp has done, 4 games, you'd have to change the result in for 1 Premier League trophy and 1 Champions League trophy to turn into 3 Premier League trophies and 3 Champions League trophies. And 2 of those games are the Champions League finals. That is unbelievable. When you look at the spending that we've done compared to the spending that they've done and done illegally, I think it's criminal.
Yeah.
But it just shows you like how good this team is. And in my opinion, like this era has made me like not care so much about the trophies.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we know the context, right? Like the trophies don't necessarily reflect everything that we've had to go through in terms as a club, in terms of what we've had to face. So, yeah, it is what it is. But then it also hurts when you put it that way, right? Like
it does.
millimeters in 1819. Karius having his head on straight 17-18 probably would have changed things. Aston Villa absolutely not capitulating. Oh my God! Like, listen, if we go through this, I feel like I'm gonna have to just hop off the podcast. Right?
That's how you know. That's how you know there is no God, right? Because
right, absolutely.
Steven Gerrard's at the helm of Villa. You've got Philippe Coutinho scoring one of the goals. It's just like that. It was written in the stars.
Yeah. Listen, man. Before I hop on the podcast, let me actually hop off the podcast. Let me actually just change the subject here. Van Dijk almost won Ballon d'Or. Carries as keeper. Phenomenal. Yep, that's true. VVD greater than Rio. However, Rio came into a top club from day one. Yeah, that is true. Liverpool was pretty much a project when Verge came in. He was one of the foundations of the project. So Ryan is saying that, are we now saying Liverpool are a small team? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're just competing against a bunch of people who don't follow the rules. Like, you can be a big team but follow the rules as well, Ryan, which I think the club has done a great job. FSG has been doing, which is a great segue to what Richard is asking. What do you think about FSG as owner? We've kind of touched on this towards the end of last week's podcast, right, where we feel like in terms of sticking by the rules, in terms of playing within the framework of the FA's financial fair play, we've pretty much done all we can in terms of being as competitive as we can, keeping our books balanced and all that. So I feel like as much as I don't want to turn this into an FSG out or FSG in show, right? That's pretty much our stance here, at least on the Wednesday show. Right? Yeah. Let me see. Before we move on, did I miss anyone here in the comments? Not to leave anyone out. Brentford and Bayer Leverkusen duking it out for Sepp Vandenberg, 20 plus 5 million add-ons agreed by both clubs. What do you think about that amount, Gordon?
I mean, it's great business.
Right?
Business. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's in terms of what you got for what you sell for what you got in the beginning. I think it's a good buy. I know, like in the Discord, it came across as like I didn't like that. I made a comment about how it's a tough one for Sepp, because when he came in, he was supposed to be like the next big thing, and he didn't get a sniff here. Moved around the country, and I just pointed out that, like, as a sport, football is like this, where young players come up and they're supposed to be the next thing, and then we never see them again, and they get moved around. And like, while some players kind of take that and run with a younger club like Sepp might do, he's only 22, so his career is essentially just beginning, and he could have a great career. But it's just one of those things that the sport chews up kids and spits them out sometimes, and it could be extremely damaging. So I'm not saying that's happening to Sepp. I also understand that, like, you cannot run a team emotionally, because you would fail 100%.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, for a human level, because I think sometimes we ignore that, or we like to ignore it because it's hard to think about. But on a business sense, fantastic bit of business. Makes sense.
And that kind of leads us to the point where obviously Sepp's leaving, Gomez is probably leaving, unfortunately. So that means we absolutely have to be in for a center back, right? It would just be absolute negligence if we don't come in for a center back at this point, considering Kwanzaa is young, Kanate is injury prone, and we've like thrown a shitload of games to Virgil throughout his Liverpool career, right? So I mean, that's the only positive thing I could take from you. Like at this point, it's just common sense that we got to take a center back at this point. So yeah, it's like I said, and a goddamn left back, absolutely, like very much so, Ryan. No, so like I said earlier, it's going to be an interesting last 10 days for the transfer window. So let's move on away from that a little bit and talk about this article that you actually sent this morning, Gordon, about how it froze for some reason. But there we go. Where do media predict Liverpool to finish in the 2024-2025 Premier League season? That is always an interesting topic of conversation because you got Gary Neville saying that we're going to finish outside the top 4. I believe the consensus pick was we'd make top 4 around third place, right? I believe was the consensus pick there.
If you took everybody's picks, I think that's probably where they ended up, was like third if you combined everyone's picks.
Right. And I believe when I did my season prediction thing on the Discord, which you guys should hop on, by the way, it's some pretty crazy stuff that happens there, especially during game days, mind you. There are fights, there are people like losing their head, there are people losing their will to live until we score a goal and everyone's all changes, good again. Right. It's just the highs and lows of the football world there. But yeah, Gordon, what do you make of these? Are they sort of in line in terms of like the consensus view? In terms of how you saw the season coming in, like let's say we don't make a signing, we stick with what we got, we stick with our guns. Do you agree top 4 probably third, and then we make a pretty decent challenge on all 4 fronts?
I can't with the squad. If we don't make a single, even if we make signings at this point, I don't think we have the legs to go for four trophies this year. I don't think that's smart to do either, especially with Champions League football. So you want to make and we've got an additional 2 games now with this new crazy format for the Champions League. So you've got more games. You want to definitely make the knockout stages of the Champions League. Whether or not you go deep in that it's just bonus at that point. But yeah, definitely want to continue to make 4th. And I think, trying to go deep in either the domestics is probably not a smart idea, and I don't think we have the legs for it. So I would hate to burn ourselves out trying to go for those.
Ryan says here top 4 in the FA Cup, which is
if you got top 4 and a trophy, I mean that's
glorious season. Yeah, glorious season, especially since it took Jurgen 4 years to get his first major trophy, and if Arnie doesn't, right? Right, was 3 finals.
He lost 3 finals, right?
Yeah, he lost 3 finals. One in the Champions League, one in the Europa League, one in the League Cup. So if Slot manages to win the FA Cup on his first season, oh boy, like that is a excellent start, getting top 4. Granted, he inherited Liverpool in a much better state than Jurgen ever did. Like he did not have Christian Benteke playing the 9 there, and it's going to be definitely a fascinating thing to look at over the next few weeks. Quick one here. Let me actually feature this. Diogo Jota's comments on playing as a 9. If I stay in the middle and wait for those chances to come in and score them, I think it's what I do best. So you could take that into the season. I feel like at this point, Gordon, as much as we like to talk about Darwin Núñez, there's no question. I feel even the most hardened Darwin Núñez stands would probably say that to start this season, Jota is the undisputed 9. Like we saw how good his press was, how good he was in keeping the shape, and in terms of, as I mentioned previously, doing his job, scoring the chances that are given to him, being a threat at all times. And not to be a shameless plug, but I kind of wrote about this on the website that this season is kind of big for him in terms of kind of emphasizing his role to the club, because let's be real, his last 2 seasons have been riddled with injuries. So if this becomes a 3rd season, it wouldn't be out of the question to actually consider selling him, right? So
definitely.
This is a big season for him to kind of come on in, because we know what he can give, right? It's just a matter of him staying healthy.
Yeah, and I think that's like the biggest comparison difference between him and Jota, and definitely between whether the fans like him or not, is like, yes, Darwin Núñez gives 1,000%, sometimes to his own detriment, but he doesn't finish. Whereas on the other hand, sometimes you have games where Jota's just non-existent, and then he gets a half chance and scores a goal, and then you just forget about it. And personally for me, like growing up in like the Brazilian era, like where they were totally dominant, and the original Ronaldo, the same thing where he could disappear the whole game, just have a god awful game, and then score a worldie and Brazil go on to win. That was the kind of stuff that I grew up on, and I appreciate that more. I would rather have a striker sort of disappear and be frustrating for 85 minutes and then score the game winner, and then we just forget about it. And so that's what Jota brings. And if we're talking about some of the best headers, like offensive headers, because I know like,
Right.
Being a defender and heading it is way different than being a forward and heading it. If we're talking about that and we take into account heights, like actual physical heights, Diogo Jota might be one of the greatest headers of the ball I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
And the fact that sometimes he's in the mix with some of these massive center backs in the Premier League, and he's the one that comes out with a really clean header. And so he's definitely the most dangerous at this point. And somebody said it earlier, but the fact that like Darwin Núñez is going to have to earn his position, I like that. Because if he earns it, he earns it. And like there's no disputing it, right? If that's the kind of manager Slot is, and everybody stays healthy, and Darwin Núñez crawls into the team on his own accord, then all the better for us as fans. But right now, yeah, Jota's number one for me.
Serzi says here, I really believe we will win the league. CL belongs to Madrid. Damn, we should have like an optimist show. And Serzi will definitely be in there, man. I would love to have his optimism there. Granted, if we do win it, I'm going to be celebrating to the moon with him in terms of how the hell did that happen. But hey, we'll take it. Ryan says here, I love the hell out of Jota's ability to play is suspect. Well, it's a great like segue into what you mentioned. And then if he could have a full season, Jota can score over 20 goals in the league, which is true because the last time he was healthy, which is the season where we tried to go for the quad, he scored 21 in all comps.
Yep.
And not every game of that season he started, right? So he's just a scorer through and through. So I feel like a lot. Everyone talks about Salah, Verge, Trent, and stuff being like the key to our season, but if Diogo Jota is healthy, that's going to be big for us this year in terms of getting where we want to be and winning a trophy or two. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but that's what scares me about like not buying anybody, for all these positions is there's a lot of like hopefuls with not buying somebody, right? Like you have to take into account all these like maybes. And like if everybody stays healthy, this is a great team. If everybody stays fit, this is a great team. But if they start, we get injuries piling up and we've got players that are just too fatigued to continue, playing 90 minutes in and out every week, especially like in the winter when, games are stacking up like sometimes 3 and 9 days. That's not a good place to be with no signings.
For sure. Trevor says here, end product trumps fruitless industry every time. Yes, I don't think anyone can agree with that. Would disagree with that rather. Jota is very similar to Karl-Heinz Riedel, short players but amazing headers of the ball. Must have been before my time, Serzi. I'm not familiar with the gentleman. Are you, Gordon? I mean, you no, okay, good. But then I'm sure he's a pretty good header of the ball, as Serzi would say. It's the hope of no injuries that kills you. True. Thiago Alcantara for the last 3 seasons, Trevor. Thiago Alcantara. So let's talk about said possible transfers, right? So this came from Fabrizio, as much as it pains me to say, right? I hate source, considering him as source, but
he doesn't like us.
Yeah, he doesn't like us. We don't like him, so the feeling's mutual. But Georgi Mamardashvili, I hope I got that right, moves to Liverpool for June 2025, now getting close, advancing to final stages, in contact to agree add-on structure package over 30 million. He would stay at Valencia on loan for 1 season. So I'll say the quiet thing out loud. Alisson's gone. Right, Gordon? This is pretty much it, right? This is probably Alisson's penultimate season, probably, until we bring in his replacement. And as you mentioned last year, this is the kind of business that we should be doing, right? Like, I'm glad that Liverpool actually decided to just pay up for what's going to be a player who's going to be part of our future spine. So the question is now, I guess, is the fact that they're taking a bit on Verge, Trent, and Salah in terms of either giving them the extension or signing a replacement means that they're looking to bring all 3 back, right? Because obviously, since we're working for this guy, you could assume that we're probably not going to go and give Alisson an extension, right? So what do you think about this?
I know originally they were looking at like 2 years on loan, so there was a possibility because here's the thing with when you
Hmm.
get older players, and I don't think with the height that those four are, and we'll take Trent out of it because he's younger,
Yeah.
but like oftentimes they can play further into their 30s than most regular players because they're just part of the reason that makes them so good is their physique. They're literally they just have the right genes, and they can continue to be athletes much longer in their careers because they take care of their bodies. There's always the possibility of those one-off, like we'll sign a 1-year deal,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
this is it. Like here's your bonuses. It's 1 year. It's going to be guaranteed money. The reason we're doing this is because your age. We'd like you to stay on for one more season. So there's a possibility that you sign all three and then you do Allison for a 1-year extension.
Hmm.
And if this is what they're saving all the money up for, I think you re-sign all four of them. I think the whole
Right.
fan base would be like, all right, good. But that does not say that you can't be looking for replacements because
Mm.
eventually they are going to age. They're going to leave. They're going to retire. Whatever it may be, they're not going to be there anymore. So you can't just say like, "We'll play you out," because that's like you see up here. That's the Blackhawks. That's what they did with Seabrook, right? They
Mm.
gave him like a massive contract, and
Hmm.
then they
Hmm.
let it go, and then it was so big that they couldn't bring a new talent in, and then he just was garbage for one season. But we had no other options, so we just floundered until he left, and then there's this gap that you have to fill with wages and everything, and now you're looking for a replacement at a young age at a low value that isn't ready to take that spot yet. And you can't do that because that's just bad business. So there's a possibility to sign all four of them and do a small deal for Allison.
Would you, right, and this goes for you and for anyone who's listening in the audience, would you be happy if we managed to sign all four to varying extension deals, but we don't get anyone for this transfer window and for the winter transfer window?
Me personally, or like everybody in the chat?
Well, starting with you first, but then those in the chat like
I
comment
feel
what you
like that
think
would
about
go
it.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It worries like the winter. We never do much in the winter anyway. So I think if we don't sign
Yeah.
anyone, you're probably not looking at anyone
It's
in
increasingly
the
likely
summer.
that we're probably not going to get anyone though at this point, right? Because we
That's
don't,
true.
yeah, we don't do anything in the winter as much, and then we got 10 days left. So I feel like the only thing that we can kind of cling on to is set extensions, right?
Yeah. But they have to be like reasonable extension. I know
Reasonable, yeah. Hmm.
most people will go nuts regardless, but like as for us as like people who actually look at the sport and like we have to talk about it on a daily basis, it's the fine details of a re-signing are going to be very important, I think.
Mm. Trevor says that's a no from me, dog. Well, yeah, I mean, it is kind of disheartening, but then to an extent, keeping the likes of Trent for maybe what 4 or 5 years, Verge for maybe one, as you mentioned, the fine details, right? Verge for maybe 1 2 years, Salah for one more year. I would be pretty content. I'd be okay. I'd not be happy. I'd just be like fine with it, I guess. But then I know there's like room for improvement. Like because we can do everything. We can sign these four to an extension and get something
Yeah.
like get like obviously that's the ideal world scenario, but it looks increasingly likely that we're moving away from it. So which is unfortunate. I'm assuming Anthony Robinson in January, right?
Yeah.
So
That one seems to split the fan base.
yeah. I can't pretend that I've watched too much of the guy Gordon, but obviously you've kind of seen him in a U.S. men's national team capacity, and have probably seen him more playing in the Premier League. So what do you say about that potential?
He's not. I like him personally, but I do know that he is. It's one of those polarizing figures for the fan base in the sense of like some people like really hate. It doesn't seem like anyone's like on the fence about him. It's either like you really like him and think he'll slot in, or and no pun intended there, or you hate him and you don't think he's right. He's definitely a different player than Robertson. But I think he can hold his own. I think that he would be a good addition. He's got a lot of speed. He's got Premier League experience for a number of years. He is on the U.S. men's national team. He's almost probably one of the first names on the sheet when they write the list up for who they're calling in. So this guy is a veteran. I mean, he's definitely. I think he's better than Costas. So I would bring him in for that. But yeah, definitely a different player. But I think he would fit in. I thought he would fit in better under Klopp, but like I haven't seen enough of Slot to be like, oh, he wouldn't
That is
work.
true.
I think he's a
That
good
is
enough player. I like him a lot.
Yeah, Ryan says here he's really good crossing, good pace, plays defense, and Steven says here love Robinson, bring him in. So it's pretty much 3 out of 3 here.
The
Quick,
Wednesday crew.
yeah,
like Robinson. All right, well, I'm
right,
amongst my people.
absolutely. Quick one here. Thoughts on Pochettino? I would love to hear your thoughts on Pochettino coming in as the U.S. national. I personally, right, as an outsider looking in, I don't follow the U.S. men's national team as much, but if I'm not mistaken, Gordon, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, this is the best manager that the team has had ever.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, on their short list of who was like available and who was like in contention, this was the creme de la creme. This is the best signing the U.S. men's national team could do at the time, in terms of name and basically his Twitter following, if you will, like the global name. That was definitely the biggest get for them. It worries me a little of like his poor record with youth, but that's about it. I think he's got the problem with anyone that comes in, especially someone that's had so much experience in so many different leagues. He's got a broken system like behind him, right? It's like basically it's like a tricycle without one of the back wheels. It's like it's there. You could find a wheel and you could probably roll down the street, but like, are you doing anything with it? And the unfortunate thing is it's all going to fall on him because of his name. Like if it doesn't work. So he's got a lot of work to do, especially he's only got 2 years to do it because, we're going to be on home soil in 2 years for the World Cup. And it's not so much, I think we have the right players, which is great. I think the system is outdated and needs a huge revamp. I think we run a lot, especially the MLS even, we run a lot based on American sports. It just doesn't, it's not how this game is played.
Do you think he manages to turn it around?
I think if they give him the time, they allow him to be who he is, and they give him what he needs and not stand in his way. And some of it's going to be, some tough decisions for management, but like people that have been sitting in board positions for X number of years that have a lot of, clout within the community of the U.S. men's national system. If he deems all that unnecessary or wants to make changes and they let him, I think he could definitely make some changes. He's not going to be the guy, right? I think he's going to be he's probably going to be somebody that changes the club. Like this is the hope, right? That he changes it for somebody else to do, because I don't think he's going to be given all the time. I think like when the World Cup rolls around, a lot of the blame is going to be laid at his feet and it's not really going to be his problem. And I don't think he's going to be in for a long time, but hopefully long enough to make the right changes so that the program can move forward.
Yeah, it's a pretty intriguing appointment, and it honestly made me raise an eyebrow in terms of like keeping tabs on the. I honestly don't really follow him, but then when they got Pochettino, I was like, I actually rate him as a manager. I thought the stuff that he did at Tottenham was great, and I thought he was just placed in unwinnable situations at PSG and Chelsea. It's just an unfortunate circumstance for him. But as you mentioned, I feel like if they give him time, they give him the leeway to actually implement what he wants to happen, then maybe he can actually get this thing rolling. There's the hope. Like, because at this point, I am American, so I probably should support our team. Right? So yeah, and it's not like it's an incompetent squad, as we've said. There's some pretty competent players there who can make some noise if just given the right guidance. So let's just touch on this quick, because this piece of news just really stings for some reason, and I think everyone knows why. Man City has re-signed Ilkay Gundogan to return from Barcelona on a free. Midfielder has won 14 trophies, first spell in the club. Insane, by the way. There was a point of conversation in the Discord around a week ago about how Man City hasn't gotten better. I don't know who it was, and they might be right, but then you have a team who just brings in one of the best midfielders in the world on a free at this point. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like maybe
it's phenomenal.
Maybe they realize maybe we're not as good as we think. So let's bring back one of our best players, of this era. Like it just, as someone who's watched his team fall short to these guys multiple times, it's just heartbreaking when you think that you can have you have a sniff, right? And then they go do this, right? Pretty much if you're an Arsenal fan as well, because they're pretty much in the same boat, right?
Yeah, I think this is one of these signings that can totally change the season because, while he's not going to give you the minutes anymore, He's going to give you a reliable guy to, close out games. He can probably give you 90 minutes still in a pinch if you have injuries and things. So he's a great backup. But what this guy is going to bring to the locker room as a serial winner who understands Pep's system, you can't put a price on that. This is a phenomenal piece of business, and it hurts to see it. But when he was like, I don't really want to sign for Barcelona, like two weeks ago, maybe the first inklings came out, and I was like, oh, he's going back. He's going back 100%. Why would he not? Yeah, it's a good piece of business for both parties.
I would have loved him at Liverpool too.
Oh, yeah.
Like why we were not on that? I mean, I guess it's difficult at this point to kind of convince him to come over, because if we still had Klopp, that would make sense. Definitely. Former player, former manager, and maybe he'd want a shot at his former team to beat them. Being on the opposite side. But it is what it is. Like I think it was Ryan who mentioned it, or Matouche. It's the 115 that we have to go up against. This is what we've had to go up against this decade, people. Like Man City just getting better when it seems like they're actually falling off. So, yeah, as much as we – speaking of Man City and getting better, or falling off, rather, Sterling – Chelsea will listen to offers for Raheem Sterling 2 years after signing him from Manchester City in a $50 million deal. Sterling was taken to one side by Enzo Maresca after training on Friday and was told he was not in the head coach's first team plans. This is actually surprising for me in terms of a new manager, right? And I believe Maresca worked with Chelsea. Worked with Sterling when he was at Man City. Did he?
Yeah, he was on the Man City board. I'm not sure. I'd have to look up like when if their times are overlapped. But yeah, he was definitely at City at one point. So if Raheem was there,
yeah, it's surprising because this seems like doesn't seem like a financial thing, right, Gordon? This seems like more of I don't fancy him playing for my style, so he's free to leave. Right, this doesn't seem like Chelsea offloading to keep the books balanced, which is strange because this is a new manager coming in, trying to seamlessly transition from the old regime, right? You pretty much, I mean, as much as we dislike Raheem Sterling, he's a pretty solid player objectively. He can pretty much do a role, do it professionally, and, kind of serve as a mentor role for some of the younger guys on the team. So for me, this is pretty much surprising. I don't know how you feel about it, but what do you think?
I think when you look at who they have in the surplus of players, I think that Raheem is already, without having touched the ball. I know that there's a game going on, or there has already been a game on. But when you look at the quality of players that they brought in the positions that Sterling plays, he's probably already third in the pecking order, and they're younger.
Fair.
Raheem also has like an attitude issue that's carried with him, which might be a factor. And then I read something that he might have been a squeaky wheel when some of these other players were kind of getting pushed aside when all these other contracts, like Gallagher was one of them. And I forget who the other player was that he was kind of being a fly in the manager's ears about some of the treatment from some of the players that have been there for a long time. They're kind of getting pushed with all these new signings. So it just might just be ideal. Mm-hmm. The ideals don't match up together, and they don't want him around because they don't really need him, and he's kind of surplus at this point. And if you're going to be a squeaky wheel as a surplus, they'll show you the door. So
Chelsea managers mustn't like players running around like a chicken.
I don't think any of us do. The fact that my favorite thing about the video games is that they capture his running style perfectly.
Yeah, for sure. If Sterling went to Arsenal with expectations being on the bench, they'd win the league. That was a joke. Okay, that was a joke. Thanks for clarifying. I guess I was like, really? In regards to Gundogan, Klopp wanted him. He just didn't get. He just wanted to be ran into the ground. Yeah, I guess so. Which is it's a great topic. It's a great point of discussion as the season wears on, because you can see players like, not to bring him up again, right? Because this isn't the Ryan Gravenberg show. This is the American Scouser, right? But in terms of technical players, it seems like Slot is a better manager to get the best out of them than a Jurgen Klopp. Like this, it's very early, right? It's very early. It could change. But in terms of getting the best out of these players who aren't necessarily the most physically dominant, the most physically pristine, I guess, if that's a good word, it might be a better fit for the system. So it's gonna be definitely interesting to see as the season goes on. As is American Scouser prediction, Gordon. Let us end this show with a prediction. So who is your starting 11 this weekend against Brentford?
I I think they probably line up the same way,
Same way.
except I'm going to say Gakpo for Diaz.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that everyone's probably going to say start Konate because
Mm-hmm.
of what he did.
Mm-hmm.
But Kwanzaa started the first game of the season. Big one for your first game as a manager in the league.
Mm-hmm.
You thought about the lineup, and something about Kwanzaa made sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was his contributions in preseason or something that he's seen in the training grounds, I wouldn't be surprised to see exactly the same lineup except Gakpo for Diaz.
How much does this factor Ivan Toney playing? Because I remember seeing that he was probably on his way to Saudi. But then before we got on the show, I thought I saw a clip of Thomas Frank saying that he's back in training and that we'll never know what's going to happen. Anything can happen in football, I believe is what he said. And obviously, being the physical presence that Toney is, do you think Slot goes with Kwanzaa, or does he pretty much kind of does he bite the does he call the bluff, right, and put Konate in just in case, right? Like considering next, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, there's definitely a possibility.
Mm.
There's also like he knows that it worked when he changed him at halftime. If it's not working, so he could do it again. I think there's so much attacking threat with Brentford that even if Toney doesn't start, like Mbeumo is always going to be a threat. And I know even Wisa, who scored, they both scored at the last weekend. So it sounds like I'm just reading off a score sheet. But both those guys are absolute goal threats. So even without Ivan Toney in there, and we have to remember that he's also, he was out for a year, and then he also had an injury at the tail end of last year, so he's not 100% fit. Maybe not even in the right mindset when he's got this, or he thought he had this big move to Saudi that looks like it's fallen through. So there's a thought that if you're going to put Konate in to cover Toney, there's already threats out there. So if you think Kwanzaa can't handle the threat, you're going to start Konate anyways, because I think Mbeumo gives you enough goal scoring threat that you put somebody bigger out there.
Would you go with Robertson still?
That's a good one.
We're at home, to be fair. Crowd's fired up. Perfect game for Robertson, to be fair, in terms of him just parading around that left side.
He wasn't terrible, but he gave away a couple of free kicks in dangerous areas that I think Brentford would threaten way more than Ipswich did. And so maybe that's a risk. But again, he looked off the pace, and if he's giving you something in training, maybe because we even thought like, oh, it doesn't matter if Robertson doesn't come in and train, he's going to get that spot over Costas because he just works better. Like, and maybe that was what happened. Is like Slot hadn't seen enough of Robertson and was thought, well, this is the guy because he's been the guy, and I know he can give me a performance. He puts him out and kind of disappointed a little bit, but he's had a full week of training, so. If Robertson is right and he's saying he's not having pain anymore and he's starting to make strides, I could see him starting. But if just solely based on performance, because that's the other thing, we don't get to see trainings.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's going on. So with performances, it probably cost us over Robertson then too. So it'd be basically the whole left side would be different for me.
Midfield, same. McAllister, Gravenberch, Soboslai.
Yeah, it worked. I mean, it was sluggish in the first, but I think they kind of figured out what they were supposed to do in that second. Again, helped a little bit having somebody a little bit more aggressive behind them both of them with Verge and Konate behind them, and also with Ipswich kind of pushing off of the full court press, if you will. So yeah, I would keep that because I think we saw the fruits of like how intricate that center could be.
We're pretty much stride for stride in the attack as well, but I feel like he still goes with Diaz over Gakpo. I'd want Gakpo to start, but I feel like he'd just go Diaz. And personally, Gakpo having the long-ass tournament that he did, it might make sense, but then at the same time, you might want that end product more from Gakpo, so it's pretty much a double-edged sword. Personally, I would go what Sir Z mentioned here. Alisson, Trent, Kwanzaa, because Kwanzaa, primarily, I don't want the kid's confidence to like wane a little bit. Like I just want to give him that like, okay, you didn't really do good here, but I still trust you enough to make up for it, right? Tsimikas, I felt like his deliveries in the box are infinitely better than Robertson's. Although being at home, it's pretty much a coin flip for me. So I stick with Simicast for now. But then if Robertson starts, I wouldn't mind it either. Calster, Gravenberch, Soboslai, yeah, would easy yes for me, and Salah, Jota, Gakpo, pretty much. Tony, Carvalho, and Mbuemo, defenders have to be on point. Absolutely. I think this is the kind of game where we're expected to win, but then at the same time, we kind of have to be like, we have to keep our back.
It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy at all. So on that note, Gordon, let's close this out with an early prediction. What do you think?
I can see this one being 3-1.
3-1.
Yeah, Brentford scores first, which is going to scare everyone. We're going to tie it. We'll tie it right before the halftime, and then everyone will be concerned about the first half. We'll come out just the way that we did the second half against Ipswich and just completely dominate and get 2.
Darn, Klopp is left, but then we're still the slow starters, right? Like, I mean, this is still his team.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a pretty difficult habit to stamp out, which, obviously get it out early, start off slow early. Then, as the season wears on, hopefully they kind of figure themselves out. I'm going to go with Alan goes here with 3-1 as well in honor of our fearless leader. Yes, I am going to do this as well, the special in order of our fearless leader, Timucin. I agree with Gordon. I feel like we're going to get a scare the first half. An early goal from Brentford, but then we sort of pick ourselves up and then end up dominating the rest of the way 3-1 as well. But yeah, Cersei says here 2-0 Salah and Gakpo.
Man, 2-0 starts the season. I don't think it gets better than that.
Right. The last time we started like being this secure defensively, we went for the quad. So hopefully that's like a good sign, like in terms of our defensive. And I did predict that. I think I predicted on the Discord channel that Alisson would win the Golden Glove, which I think last year we had just 9 clean sheets, which is nowhere near like this.
What, Raya had 18? I'm pretty sure he finished.
Right, exactly, yeah. Which is ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, well, Gordon, it's been a pleasure. This is show 1 out of 2. With just the 2 of us, right? That's through. Next week.
I should have told everyone no one's going to tune in next week.
Well, that's probably. I mean, we got a decent amount of viewing here, for just the 2 of us carry two of the 3 front 3. Like it's just Firmino and Mane here. Salah's missing, and we still managed to get the win. So, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. If you do not yet, please follow us on our socials, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We even have a TikTok, if you guys can believe. So please tune into that. We are at, I believe, 866 subscribers, 866, 865. So we're looking to get to that 1,000 mark by the end of the year, which is going to be a massive milestone. I've spoken with Timucin, actually, that if we do get to 1,000, we're actually going to host a 1,000 subscriber show, which is going to be like a massive thank you to all the subscribers. But yeah, if you haven't yet, please press that subscribe button. Please press that like button. Please press that follow button, depending on that platform that you're in. It's greatly appreciated. And I believe the Thursday night crew, if I'm not mistaken, will be coming on tomorrow. But in terms of us, the morning crew, we appreciate you tuning in. And we will see you guys next week, Wednesday. Tune in Thursday and Friday for our next broadcast here at American Scouser. Everyone, take care.